Welcome back to Speaking of Meaning, Better Communication, Greater Impact. I have with me John Zimmer, a recognized international speaker. He has been recognized as Europe's best speaker 9 times. And he has a wonderful blog, Manner of Speaking, that has over 5 million readers. I'm excited for this conversation because John is an expert not only on public speaking and communication, but also on persuasion. John, welcome.
Great to be here, Ibrahim. Nice to be on the show.
For our guests who perhaps have not heard about you before, can you tell us about your background?
Sure. The very short version. I'm from Canada. I'm a lawyer by training. I worked many years in corporate commercial litigation and environmental law in one of Canada's biggest law firms in Toronto. In 1998, I had a great opportunity to come to Geneva, Switzerland, where I currently am. Opportunity with the United Nations that led to 17 years with the UN, the International Organization for Migration, and also the World Health Organization. But 10 years ago, I thought that's enough of the UN, and I became independent to do what I do now, which is public speaking, presentation skills training, giving speeches, moderating events, that kind of thing.
So, have you always been doing communication and public speaking?
Well, as a lawyer, I was fortunate to work in a law firm that gave young lawyers a chance to go to court and to get up on your feet and to try and to do argue cases before courts and tribunals. So my whole career really has been about communication, written and spoken.
Okay. And I read that you have been the best speaker in Europe 9 times.
Well, that's probably a bit too grand to say the best speaker in Europe, but I did win a few speaking contests along the way with Toastmasters International. And this was at a time when the district in which I was the entirety of Europe.
And how did you become interested in public speaking and communication?
I've always enjoyed being on stage and speaking in front of people. And as a lawyer, when you're representing clients, there's a nice feeling to know that you are actually speaking on behalf of someone. And then when I left the law to do what I do now, it's really the same thing. You're up on your feet. You're trying to give people value for the time that they're giving you. And it's a chance to share a message. It's a chance to make an impact as well.
All right, making an impact. So if somebody's listening right now and they're asking themselves, why should I worry about public speaking? I don't have to speak in public. What would you tell them?
I think even if you're not speaking at major conferences, public speaking could involve speaking to 5 of your colleagues at an important team meeting. And I think it's an important skill to learn because of something that the former chairman of the Chrysler Car Company in the United States, Lee Iacocca, said. He said, you can have great ideas, but if you can't get your ideas across, your ideas aren't going to get you anywhere. And I meet people all the time in what I do, and brilliant people who are motivated, people who are excited about what they're doing, people who have fantastic ideas. But if they can't find a way to communicate these ideas in a way that is clear, that is memorable, that is persuasive to move people to take some kind of action, then their ideas won't go as far as they might have gone otherwise.
So have you met leaders who struggle with communication and creating a compelling and inspiring message?
Sure, all the time. And it's not because they're not intelligent or not capable of it. It's in some cases, it's because they've just learned bad habits over the years. In others, it's because they're so busy that they don't have the time to devote to really stepping back and thinking about the presentation or the speech that they're going to give. Everybody faces challenges. I still face challenges as a speaker. I find I'm always learning. You get to the top of one mountain and then you realize that there are higher mountains to climb. And so it's a lifelong skill. But the good news is that if people are prepared to work at it, even just to improve incrementally every day, every week, then over time, they can become very compelling speakers.
if we talk a little bit about leaders, because a lot of people can benefit even if you're not a leader. But obviously, if you are a leader, you have a position where you have to speak, you have to influence, you have to inspire. Why should leaders not only care about speaking, but also persuasion and the art of influence?
Well, I think leaders, they have they have people for whom they are responsible. They have people whom they are leading. That is the very nature of the definition of a leader. And as a leader, you have to persuade people about, to do what it is you want them to do. I think you also have to inspire them and motivate them and get them to believe in the value of what they're doing. And so you look at leaders of companies today who are, whether they're multinationals or mid-sized companies or even small companies, I would think that they would want to inspire, motivate, persuade their employees to do a great job for the benefit of the company, but also for their own benefit.
Do you often find yourself in conversation with leaders? Do you often find yourself trying to convince them of why it is important with persuasion and the art of public speaking?
Sometimes. I think most leaders know the importance of good communication skills. I think the persuasion on my part comes in the how, in trying to get them to let go of the text-heavy slides, in trying to get them to maybe, tell a personal story as part of the overall presentation. I think that's where there's more persuasion coming from my part.
That's interesting. And what is the most common argument they use against telling a personal story?
I think, I don't know if it's so much an argument, but I think throughout their careers, they've seen, I know I've seen, and I suspect you've seen as well, so many business presentations, which are just facts, facts, data, 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 data. And they see this all the time. And so they think, well, this must be how it's done. But the reality is that there's no rule that says it has to be all data. In fact, if it's only data, the speaker would have saved everybody a lot of time by just turning the slides into a PDF and emailing them, because people can't absorb and retain too many things at one time. They're going to need to go away. They're going to need to read more about it, think about it. But the point of a presentation isn't to flood people with as much information as possible. It's to get them to remember a few key points. And then they can go away and do further research and reading on their own.
I think this is very common. I remember one time when my boss was going to inform us about an organizational change. And I could see when he started his PowerPoint presentation that he had 80 slides. And after slide number 4, people just started reading what was on the PowerPoint slide and stopped listening to him because all the information was there.
Yeah. And I tell people, I say, look, if you put a slide that is full of text and information and 3 graphs or whatever, you force your audience to make a choice. Either I'm going to listen to you and not look at the slide, or what is more likely to happen, I'm going to look at the slide and then start reading. But then the speaker has a second problem, because people are going to be reading different things at different times. The methodical readers are going to start at the top and work their way down. The fast readers are already 2 bullet points ahead. The visual people are looking at the chart, and we're all over the place. It's interesting, you said he had 80 slides. I'm not opposed to having a lot of slides in a deck. In fact, one of the questions people will ask me, they say, I've got half an hour to speak or an hour to speak. How many slides should I use? I always say, my answer is always the same. I don't know. Maybe 10, maybe 50, maybe 17. The number of slides is less important than the fact that each slide should be well designed. So you could easily have a 40-slide presentation, 40 slides in a 20-minute presentation, if the slides are well designed and they help move the presentation along. Unfortunately, what you usually get is the worst of both worlds. You get a lot of slides poorly designed, and so that's not great.
Yes, I became nervous because I knew that there was going to be a lot of information on each slide.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of times people will tell me, they say, yes, but I hand out the slides at the end so that
Mm,
people have a takeaway document. And I
mm,
will ask them, I say, so everything I need to know is in the slides. And they say, yeah, it's all there. And I say, that's fantastic. Why do I need you then?
mm,
And
mm,
I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's a sincere question. If everything's in the slides, like I said, make it a PDF. People can read faster than you can speak.
mm,
But if you use the slides as a clean support tool for a message that you want to share with me, then I'm in. Then I
mm,
want to hear what you have to say.
mm,
A good rule of thumb for slides that I tell clients is that most slides should be like the sign beside the autoroute or the highway. You're driving along at 120 kilometers an hour, and there's a sign coming up that says how long to the next gas station and where the next exit is, that kind of thing. When you're driving at 120, 130 kilometers an hour, how long do you have to look at the slide, at the sign? 3, maybe 4 seconds? You get the information, then you have to get back to the road. Otherwise, it's dangerous. And I think that's the way it should be with most slides. For most slides, I should be able to look up and in a couple seconds get the idea and then get back to the speaker.
mm.
You can have a complex slide from time to time if you, number one, you bring in elements using a simple animation, bring in elements one at a time. And number two, that you spend the adequate amount of time on that slide so that people can absorb what you're saying.
So what I hear you say, John, is help them focus on you, because
Exactly.
otherwise their attention is gonna compete between the slide and you as a speaker.
Exactly. The slide is ancillary. The slide is secondary. You, as the speaker, are the most important thing there.
So usually when we try to speak, when we present, when we talk in public, our goal is to try to perhaps sell a product, sell an idea. Sometimes maybe we are doing an interview, we're trying to sell ourselves and our services. That is how we try to influence others. So my question to you is manipulation related to persuasion?
It is related. And it's funny, I was doing a training yesterday and I got the question about when we were talking about the use of emotion. The question was, well, isn't this just manipulating your audience?
Mm,
And I said, here's the way I think about it, the difference between persuasion and manipulation. Persuasion is about getting to do the audience to do something that is good for them, that is in their interest, or that is in the general interest of society, for example, something positive. And there can be also a benefit for the speaker. There's nothing wrong with a mutual benefit situation, a win-win situation. I think manipulation, I think of that as you're trying to get the audience to do something that is either against their interests or that is a bad thing to do.
mm,
I mean, politicians, unfortunately, they manipulate people all the time. Not all politicians. Politicians also persuade, but that's an example where you can see manipulation. So there's clear overlap because with both persuasion and manipulation, you're trying to get other people to do something.
mm.
The question is, what's the end result? What's the benefit or the detriment that occurs? That's how I think about it.
Then intention plays a major role.
In my opinion, a huge role. Huge.
What is the intention?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And so do you need to be able to influence others and learn these techniques in order for you to also uncover or spot when somebody is trying to manipulate you?
I think it definitely makes you more aware when you're in the opposite situation when somebody's trying to influence you. I think a lot of people have an instinct for it. You did you ever read what was it, Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink? This idea about how first impressions are often the correct ones. Like there's something that it just doesn't feel right in a case like that. I think a lot of people have that
Hmm.
sense. But if you study rhetoric and persuasion. And then you can also get into this whole field of, cognitive biases and things like that. Then it's easier to spot.
So basically, our gut feeling plays a major role as well.
I think so. I think so.
That's very interesting. I like that, the whole idea about intention. So becoming a good speaker, learning the art of influencing others, it's what you do with it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, businesses who have to sell a product or a service, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if they don't sell their products or services, they're not going to be in business for very long. The question is, are their products good quality products? Have they been sourced in a sustainable way? Are they respecting labor laws? That kind of thing.
And you can have the best idea, the best product, but if you don't know how to tell people about it, how to sell it, how to persuade others, it's not going to happen.
No, no. The inferior product may well win because they've got a better pitch, they've got a better story to tell.
If we try to understand the basic of persuasion, where does it begin? Is it a mindset? Is it a skill? Is it deeper than that?
I think it's a couple of things. I think belief plays a big role in it. First, belief in yourself, belief in the idea that you are selling as well. Many times people will say to me, how do I give a presentation about an idea I don't believe in? And I'm always honest with them. I say, it's not easy. It's not easy. Beyond that, then we get into the different techniques of persuasion, and we go back 2,300 years to ancient Greece and, Aristotle and rhetoric and the whole basis of persuasion, logos, ethos, and pathos. And for people who don't know what these things are, even if you've never heard these terms, you know instinctively what they are. Logos essentially is persuasion by logic. It's things like the coherence of your presentation, facts, statistics, data, very left brain thinking. I'm a lawyer by training, so I'm very logos oriented. Everything has to be very structured and clear for me. The second pillar, ethos, is persuasion by virtue of the speaker's personal credibility. Things like the person's reputation, authority, expertise, that kind of thing, that can help influence. Also, part of ethos, I mean, these things I mentioned, reputation, authority, expertise, you build these up by living your life, by going through your career. And if you're junior in your career, there's a chance that you're not going to have as much reputation or authority as somebody more senior. And that's just life. You build it up over time. But you can also have an influence on your own ethos as seen by the audience by your stage presence. Are you looking at people? Are you pausing? Are you doing all of these nice gestures on stage and not, you're not looking down, you're not staring at the slides? That makes a difference as well. So there's logos, ethos, and then the third pillar is pathos. Interesting word, comes from the Greek word related to both emotion and suffering. And so we get words today in English and other languages like sympathy, empathy, pathology, pathogen. All of these relate to pathos, which is persuasion by emotion, storytelling, humor, surprise, that kind of thing. So those are the three main pillars. There's a fourth pillar, though, which I think is important and it's less well known. It's called Kairos. Kairos is an interesting word. The Greeks have two words for the concept of time. There's chronos, and we get words like chronology or chronological from chronos, which is the time we're most familiar with. The time of, the day, the hours going by in a day or the months going by in a year. But then there's this second concept of time, Kairos, which means the appropriate time, the right time to make an argument, the right time to sell an idea, and also the right time to use emotion, the right time to use facts and logic. So all of this plays a role in persuasion.
That's very interesting. So timing is also important.
Sure. You often see, an event might happen. Let's say there's, a severe drought or flooding or an unexpected weather event, and people who are very concerned about global warming and climate change, they might think, well, in light of what has just happened, now is a good time once again to remind people about the importance of taking certain steps to help reduce the impact of global warming.
This is very interesting. And do you need all four to be influential, or can you get away with one or two?
No, I think you need them all. I mean, obviously, Kairos underpins everything. You want to bring the right argument forth at the right time. Then you've got the other three pillars: the logic, the credibility, and the emotion. And the way I like to think of those three is as follows. I want my credibility in the eyes of the audience to be as high as possible. I want them to think he knows what he's talking about. He's really thinking about what might be valuable to me, and he's going to give me some value for my time. I want it to be as high as possible. The logic, the logos, and the pathos, the emotion, these are more variable. These are more variable. You want, depending on who the audience is, what you're talking about, what the situation is, you're going to want to use more of one and less of the other. In the typical business presentation, you are almost always going to have more logic, more logos than pathos. And that's fine, but don't leave the emotion out altogether. Because, people should be excited. If you're selling a new product or service, there should be some level of emotion there. You can tap into emotion. It's like a recipe. You want to have the ingredients in the right amounts, and that's what really makes the best impact.
So when I hear you say storytelling, emotion is important, even in business presentations.
Storytelling is huge, and it still surprises me how little it is used. It's being used more these days than it was, but there's still so much more potential for it. And the reason is that stories are something that are fundamental to the human experience. I mean, stories have been around for thousands of years. They've been around a lot longer than PowerPoint and Excel and all these things we use today. And there have been tests that have been done. I read about a test, I think it was conducted by Stanford University and The Economist, the magazine The Economist, and they put people. First of all, they put people in fMRI imaging, and they studied the brain when the person was listening to a story. And when we hear a story, different parts of the brain light up. The amygdala, related to emotion; the prefrontal cortex, which is for memory; Wernicke's area, which is for language processing. And then they also did this experiment where they had two groups of people. And group one, they gave them a bunch of facts. Group two, they gave them the same facts, but they packaged them in a story. Group two, the people in group two were able to remember many more of the facts because they could remember the story. And so this is the power of a story. Stories are memorable.
They stick, and it's got to be related to your message as well.
Has to be related, yes. You could tell a nice story, but if it has no relation, then it's just confusing.
The best advice I've received is tell a story and make a point.
Yes, tell a story, make a point. Too often, however, it's maybe one story and then point. It's true. And there's this discussion reminds me of a fantastic article that I read in the Harvard Business Review years ago. It was called "The Four Truths of the Storyteller," and it was written by a man named Peter Guber. He's a very successful businessman in the U.S., and he, among his companies, is one called Mandalay Entertainment, and they've made some big Hollywood movies like 7 Years in Tibet with Brad Pitt or Legend of Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp. And this article caught my attention because in it, the author talks about how people in business, in companies, organizations, people like you and me, how we can use storytelling techniques from Hollywood in a business presentation. And very simply, he said, for a story to make a real impact, there have to be four truths, four things that are true about it. Number one is truth to the speaker, which means you as a speaker have to feel something for the story. It has to mean something to you, which is why personal stories are so great, because they're part of who we are. The second truth is truth to the audience. There's got to be something in your story that if I'm in the audience, I can take and apply in my life. For example, companies hire people who have done amazing things like, I don't know, maybe they've climbed Mount Everest. They bring them in and they give a talk about their climbing Mount Everest. Well, how many people from the company do you think are going to go climb Mount Everest afterwards? I'm guessing zero. That's my guess. So why bring the person in? Well,
Yeah.
maybe there's something in her story about teamwork or something in her story about resilience in the face of challenges. That's truth to the audience. The third one is truth to the moment, which means you tell the right story in the right amount of detail at the right time. So people sometimes like to tell a story which goes on and on and on. You got to be able to keep it tight as well and condensed for the situation. And then the fourth truth is what he calls truth to the mission. How does this story help the audience move towards the mission, the objective that you have set for them, which brings us all the way back to this idea of persuasion.
So these four steps are important because when I hear them, I think about emotionally connecting with the audience, with your listeners.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. This is emotional connection. And emotional connection is really important, especially when you're trying to sell an idea. When you're selling an idea, you're selling it on two levels. You're selling it in the head, and you're also selling it in the heart. And if I'm pitching an idea, let's say I'm pitching to you, I'd like you to invest, I don't know, €500,000, €500,000 in my idea, and I've got 10 minutes to pitch you. The chances that you are going to invest after my 10 minutes are essentially zero. You're going to want to think about it. You're going to want to do some research. You're going to want to read the prospectus, all of these things, and that's fine. But in those 10 minutes, I have a chance to get you excited about my idea, to get you interested, to get you to want to know more. Was it Daniel Kahneman? I think it was Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes.
He said when it comes to purchasing, people buy on emotion and then they justify with logic. And it's true.
I heard once, I don't remember what the author is, the author's name. He said, "We are not rational, we are rationalizing."
I like that.
And that connects to your point.
Yeah,
about
that's exactly
following your emotions and then justifying that decision.
Very much so.
Let's say you're a leader and you are giving a talk or you want to improve your communication skills. How can you stay authentic and also be influential or persuasive?
I like what the Irish playwright Oscar Wilde said. He said, "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken." And I think it comes with practice. I think the more you do it, the more you speak, the more comfortable you get with speaking. I think leaders who are serious about being authentic, I think they should go in advance. They should be proactive in terms of their feedback. They should seek out a few trusted advisors whom they know might be in the room when they speak and ask them say, "Listen, I really want you to tell me afterwards, was it me up there on the stage? Did it feel authentic?" And I think people can be authentic, and really that's, in many ways, it should be the easiest thing to be because you're just being yourself. I think the highest compliment I've ever received, and I don't get this always, but every now and then I will speak at an event, and then afterwards at the cocktail party, I'm talking maybe one-on-one with somebody, and they'll say, "You're exactly like you are here one-on-one. like you were on stage. And I'm really happy whenever I hear that because it means like I was being authentic in the moment. And it's, it's something comes with practice. And the thing is, people can tell. Audiences are pretty smart, and they can usually tell if somebody is faking it. I mean, there are some people who can fake it really well, but most people, I think it shows if they're not being themselves. I don't know if you're familiar with, he was a great man, Hans Rosling, the doctor from Sweden who at the Karolinska
Yes.
Institute, who was known as the rock star of statistics, and his first TED Talk is still a classic. When I was working at the World Health Organization years ago, he came to give a talk. And when I found out that he was going to give a talk, it was at 10 o'clock in the morning. I got to the office that day at 7, and I did about an hour and a half of work. And then I packed up some documents and I went over to the room an hour and a half early. I said, I want to be there early. I get there. There's one person in the room, and it's Hans Rosling. He's on
Wow.
stage setting everything up. I sat in the front row. I didn't disturb him. I thought I'm going to let him get set up. He worked for another 5 minutes. He saw me. He came over, and we had this 10, 15-minute conversation. And for anyone who has seen Rosling in his talks, he is very dynamic, and he's engaged, and he's running around. He's doing all these things. One-on-one, he was exactly like that. Like it was him. It was the same guy I'd seen in these videos. He was exactly that enthusiastic. And that, I'd already had huge respect for him, but my respect went up a notch that day because like it was him really being him. It was really, really, I was really sad 5, 6 years ago when he passed away. But no, that's a great example of being authentic.
What I hear you say, John, is I think being authentic, you can be yourself if you are present on the stage.
That's a really nice way to put it. You are in the moment. You are there for your audience. When you realize that you are not important, it's not about you. It's not about your idea, your product, your service. Even if there are people you're trying to help, it's not even about them. It's always about the audience. But
About
what I
the
always
audience.
tell it's about the audience. What I always tell people, I say, look, here's the promise I make to you. I said, when you go into any speaking situation, asking yourself, how can I make this time valuable for the audience? How can I really give them something of value for the time that they are giving me? Because if we step back, whatever insight, inspiration, information I can give an audience, they can get a million times that from Google or from AI now. But what they're giving me, an hour of their time, they can never get back. And when I think about it that way, it really, impresses upon me the importance of what, the opportunity I've been given. And a calculation I always do, and I encourage your listeners who might have presentations to give in the future, a really simple calculation. I take the amount of time I'm given to speak, and I multiply it by the number of people that I think will be in the audience. So for example, yesterday I did a 2-hour session with 50 people. But that's not 2 hours. It's 2 hours of his time and 2 hours of her time and two. It's 2 times 50, which is 100 hours. So now if we think about the average work week, which is more or less 40 hours, that's 2.5 full-time work weeks for one professional. That's a valuable resource, and I want to respect it by giving something of value in return.
I remember one time when I was sitting in the audience and I was listening to a good speaker, but I noticed that he was not prepared. And I looked around, and I think we were 200-300 people in the audience, and I could see people shake their heads because they were disappointed, and we could feel that he wasn't really prepared for this moment. And so I think it ties back to what you're saying. It's about your audience, respecting them, and also asking yourself before each presentation, what is my intention here? Who is the most important person right now? And that is the audience.
Yeah, it's for me, it's unacceptable if a speaker is not prepared. I mean, the only justification is in a case where, like, let's say we're working, I'm your boss and we're in a company and I've got a presentation tomorrow and something comes up and I say, Ibrahim, I'm sorry, I can't do this. You're going to have to do the presentation, and I give it to you last minute. Okay, you do what you can with the limited time you have. But for a speaker who has time, who knows that, oh, I'm going to be speaking at this conference in a month's time, you have to prepare. You've got to find time. You've got to think about
Yeah.
the relationship between your message and your audience and you, the three. You want to figure out what's your objective, what is your message, why should the audience care? You want to build it up. Yeah, it's I shake my head when I hear stories like that, but I hear it all. I hear it all the time.
It's actually very common, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's and I don't, because it's a missed opportunity. Well, first and foremost, it's lack of respect for the audience. But beyond that, it's a missed opportunity because however many people were in your audience, 300, that's 300 people who are leaving with a very bad impression of the speaker, and probably by extension, the speaker's company, if he was representing a company or organization. That's the thing. And this is why great leaders of companies and organizations understand the importance of public speaking and communication. I've read in recent years several studies and several studies that have been done by companies like LinkedIn, Microsoft, Fast Company, others, where they sent questionnaires to the heads of companies and organizations, and they were essentially asking them a single question. The question was, when you are looking to hire people who you think could be great future leaders of this company, of this organization, what are the skills you're looking for? Well, consistently at the top is the ability to communicate well, to speak well, because great leaders know that the people that they send out representing their company at conferences or with other clients, those people are the face of the company. And people are going to form impressions about the company based on this person. It's like airlines. Everybody has an airline that they don't like, and it's usually because of one bad experience. One bad experience. I've had people tell me, "Oh, this airline, I hate this airline for whatever reason," but I've only had good experiences on that airline, and yet we form a broader opinion based on a single experience.
What common mistakes do you see people making when they are trying to be persuasive?
I think the biggest mistake, besides lack of preparation, lack of proper preparation, I think the biggest mistake is people try to convey too much information. They try to do too much. They try to pack in just one more fact, one more statistic, one more reason. And I've read a lot in recent years about the power of simplicity. And you look at the masters of any domain, Chopin in classical music, Coco Chanel in haute couture, Steve Jobs in IT, Bruce Lee in the martial arts, and it goes on and on and on and on. They all talk about the radical importance of simplicity, of eliminating what is not necessary. There's a French author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who wrote the book The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, which is a classic, which I encourage everybody to read. It's a kid's book, but a kid's book for adults, if I can put it that way. And he said something that I love. He said, perfection isn't achieved when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing more to take away. And I see this all the time, people trying to add just one more thing, just one more thing, just one more thing. It reminds me of years ago, many, many years ago, I was invited by IBM to a conference here in Switzerland. Full day conference, lots of people. There were other companies there. There were breakout sessions. Very interesting day. The keynote speaker at the time was very senior in the company, a very senior guy. And his keynote, which was about a half hour long, as I remember, was going to be about new initiatives that IBM was working on at the time. And I was introduced to him in the morning, and he said, "Oh, I'd really appreciate your feedback on my talk." And I said, "Absolutely, I'd be happy to." And we get into the theater, and it's all full, 200 people. Excellent speaker, really personable on stage, very really nice presence, nice introduction. Then he started talking about the first new initiative that IBM was working on. And I remember getting really interested. And then just as I'm really wanting to know more, he went to number 2, okay? Then came number 3, number 4, number 5. In the end, because I counted, in the end, he did 14 things. And it was just like wave after wave. And when I met him after, I told him all the things that he did well, because it was an excellent speaker. But then I said, "Look, if I'm going to give you one piece of advice, it's this. Next time, don't talk about 14 things, because honestly, I can't remember any of them. It was too much. Pick 3 and go into detail." And I'll never forget his reaction. He said, "Damn it." And he punched his fist into his hand. He said, "Damn it. This is what I thought." I said, "We're doing too much, but I was told you got to talk about everything." And so even senior people get this pressure. And it's the wrong choice. Had he said, "Today at IBM, we are working on over a dozen really exciting projects. And today I want to share 3 of them with you." And then gone into the details. And people leave and they remember those 3 things, but they're also thinking, "Gee, I wonder what else they're working on." That would have been perfect.
The power of 3.
Power of 3, the power of simplicity. Yep.
And then when you share 3 things with them and they're curious, they're going to come back to you.
Exactly. That's the best. That's the best. When you've given them enough to be interested, to want to know more. And then you sit down in a meeting and you pull out, all the details and the statistics and the graphs and all of the complex stuff that they have to go through.
This is very interesting, because sometimes, let's say I'm sitting at a meeting with a client, or I'm sitting in the audience and listening to somebody speak. And sometimes when people talk just too much, when they don't know when to, if you don't have anything to say, don't say anything, just sit down. But sometimes people ramble on and on and on. And you can just see that when they do that, people stop listening. But then when you have something to say, or when you see a speaker or a leader and they have something important to say, and they say that in a clear, concise manner, and they just sit down, that's more powerful than just talking and talking without no direction.
It's like what the American President Franklin Roosevelt said: "Be clear, be brief, be clear, be seated." Say what you have to say, don't say anything more, and then sit down.
I think we need that advice.
Yeah, we all need that advice. And I mean, one way people can speak less, I think, is is the power of the pause, the power of silence. I tell people that learning to be comfortable with silence is one of the most powerful skills any speaker can learn. To leave a little bit of space for the audience. And it's not easy. And especially if you're starting out as a speaker, I know it's not easy. You're on stage and you say something and you pause, and now you're looking at the audience and you're thinking, "Oh my God, everybody's looking at me and I can feel my heart pounding." But they're looking at you because you're on stage. Whatever you're doing, if you're on stage, they're going to look at you, and nobody can feel your heart pound. But 2 things happen when you pause. Number 1, you look good. You look confident. You're not going to be rushed, and that enhances your ethos, your credibility. But number 2, and more importantly, you are giving the audience a chance to think about what you've said. You're giving them a chance to internalize what you've just been speaking about. And this is important, especially when the audience doesn't know as much as you do about the topic. Because we all suffer from something known as the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge is essentially when you know something so well that you forget what it was like when you knew nothing about it. And whatever it is you're talking about, whatever it is I'm talking about, there was a time in our lives when we knew nothing about it. And so many times people in the audience, they are at that same point or not much farther advanced. And so they need this extra time because what's obvious to you as a speaker is not necessarily obvious to the audience.
So they can use that pausing, the pause, also to transition between points.
As well.
Yeah, and I've also seen you, John, when you start your presentation. I remember seeing you for the first time in, I think it was 2012 or 2013. You were talking about, I think you were talking about being in Turkey with your daughter.
Okay, I remember that story.
And I remember when you started, you got the introduction, we clapped, and you went on the stage, and you were just silent for, I think, 3 to 5 seconds, and you got our attention. And I think a common mistake I see is usually people getting up on the stage and just starting quickly. And people are just scrolling through their phones, and they're not focusing on the speaker. But when you paused, everybody looked at you. And that was powerful because it signaled not only confidence, but also presence on the stage.
It is an important thing to do, I think, at the beginning of every presentation. Take a few seconds for yourself on stage, look at the room, get comfortable, take a deep breath, remind yourself that you're there to give the people something of value, and then you go. And the openings are very important of any presentation. Psychologists talk about principles of remembering, and two of the most important are the principles of primacy and recency. People tend to remember the first things they hear and the last things. So your openings and your conclusions should really be well structured and well prepared and well thought out. Another, in a business presentation, how do people often start? I mean often. The title slide has been up for the last couple minutes. They come on stage and, good morning. I'm happy to be here. Blah blah blah. The same old thing. And I'm going to talk about topic X, which people have just been reading about for the last 2 minutes anyway. So one thing I tell people, if you have slides, and I'm not against slides, I use slides. There's no rule that says you have to have a title slide. I almost never show a title slide. If I hand my slides out afterwards, then yes, I include the title slide with the date and the event and all of that. But there's no rule that says you have to show it, or that it has to be the first thing you show. I'll sometimes start with a black slide, and then maybe I'll tell a story, and then I'll click into the title slide. Or sometimes, and I've done this with clients, we've taken the title slide and slide number 1, and we've done this. We've swapped them. So they start with the slide, and then they transition into, my name is so-and-so, I represent company ABC, and today we're going to talk about this. And it's different. It's such a simple thing to do, but because almost nobody does it, it catches people's attention, and it sticks.
It sticks. Yeah, it sticks.
Yeah.
What you're saying here is basically start in a powerful way. Start with a bang.
Yes, you get one chance to make a good first impression. So you want to seize it. You want to hook your audience's attention. You could do it with a story. You could do it with a question. You could do it by getting the audience to reflect on something. 3 very powerful words that any speaker can use to start their speech: think, remember, imagine. Think, remember, imagine. For example, if I'm giving a talk about how to improve interpersonal relationships at work between and among colleagues, I might start a talk by saying, I'd like you to remember a time when you had a difficult conversation with a colleague at work. Pause. Now, everybody in the audience is thinking of a personal experience. And so with that one sentence, just one sentence, I've already got every individual to start personalizing my talk for them. It's a really powerful thing.
Okay, so you didn't say, hi, my name is John. You started with that question.
I never start with, who my name. I will start with a story, or I'll start with something else, and then if nobody has introduced me, then I will say a few words about myself.
Mm,
There
mm,
are two scenarios. One, nobody introduces the speaker, and in that case, a speaker has to say something about who he is or who she is, and just very, very brief. My preferred situation is where there's a moderator, somebody who's going to introduce me. Because then, if, for your listeners, if you know you're going to be speaking at an event where somebody is going to be introducing you, you should always contact them beforehand and offer to write out your introduction. They never say no because it's one less thing for them to do. And then you, as a speaker, you get to decide what is most important from your background for this audience on this occasion.
mm,
Because the moderator doesn't have time to read out your LinkedIn profile,
mm,
but you know what will be
mm,
most relevant to this audience on this day. That's
mm,
the best.
mm, mm. John, great advice. Great advice. So, uh, if we talk about leadership a little bit, if we go back to leadership, how can a leader communicate a vision, motivate others instead of just giving instructions?
I think obviously the leader has to get personal when talking about vision. The leader has to talk about, why this vision, why this idea is important to them. Many times, not always, but in many cases, it offers a leader a chance to be a little bit vulnerable with the audience. And I think vulnerability is a really powerful thing. What do I mean when I talk about vulnerability? I mean, talking about a time when you were less than perfect, when you were afraid, or when you made a mistake, or when you were feeling frustrated about something, or something wasn't working, a time when things weren't going well. And, you know, none of us is perfect. We've all had these bad times. Of course, you don't want to spend the whole talk talking about this, but to inject a story like that,
Mm,
it's a great way to connect with the audience. It really shows that a person is really willing to take a chance, and I think being a bit vulnerable is a sign of courage. I think that is a real way to tap into emotion with the audience, to connect with them at the human level. You think of big motivational speakers like, I don't know, Tony Robbins or people like of that stature. When they're on stage, they don't come on saying, "Hey, I've got three houses and two airplanes and I've done this, this, and this, and this." I mean, how did they start? 15 years ago, I was living in a single room apartment, and at the end of every month, I had to decide whether I was going to eat supper or pay the rent. Or, they tell a
mm,
story of struggle, and that is a way to connect. And so when leaders are trying to inspire people with a vision, I think a personal story helps. I think also tapping into people's better angels, if I could phrase it this way, to kind of get them excited about being part of something that is something positive that is
mm,
bigger than themselves.
mm, mm,
And I think this is really important for people these days. Dan Pink, an author whom I really admire, he wrote a book years ago called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates People. And for the things that he found that really motivate people, there are three things. Autonomy, people want to have some kind of control over what they're doing. Mastery, they want to get good at whatever it is they're doing. And then the third one, which for me is the big one, purpose. The
mhm,
idea that what I am doing is bigger than just me. It has
mm,
meaning. It is
mhm,
something that will outlast me, that will have an impact on others. And I think
mm,
leaders who are conveying a vision, they can tap into this.
mm, mm. That's beautiful. Have you seen a leader do this in real life
Yeah,
that you
I've
have
seen
worked with?
Yeah, I've seen, I've had several clients. I don't want to single anybody out, but I've had several clients where they've gotten up on stage and they've told a personal story, and they've spoken about, their vision for the company and for the employees at the company. And, I've done also corporate trainings where I've asked people, do you have examples in your office of people who've done that? And people have told me, oh gosh, I remember so and so gave this speech and it was so inspiring. And other people say, yeah, that was really powerful. And I said, well, what was powerful about it? Well, he told a story, a really powerful story about him. And this ties back to what we were saying, this study by Stanford and The Economist, that people remember the stories.
Mm.
And, when it comes to vision, most visionaries, they have an objective in mind that is worthy, but it's not necessarily easy to achieve. Most things that are worthwhile aren't easy. And
Mm.
in the hard times, when it's 8 o'clock at night and people are still in the office and there's no glamour, this is where the inspiration, the vision from the boss, remembering that helps people to push through the difficult times.
So we've been talking about business and leadership. Now, if we go to everyday life, how can we become more influential, better communicators uh, at our daily lives?
I think listening, perhaps paradoxically, is a really important thing. I think listening to people, friends, family, colleagues, when people are speaking, what I've found throughout my career, both as a lawyer and as a public speaker, is that one of the most fundamental things that is really important for people is to feel that they've been listened to. Even when you disagree, even when you have to decide between two options, A and B, and they were hoping for B, but you chose A, if they feel that at the very least you really gave full consideration to their reasons for option B, they might not be happy, but they're going to be less unhappy.
Hmm.
One of the things I do in addition to public speaking is improvisational theater. And we do performances. In fact, we have a performance, my group, the Renegade Saints in Geneva next week. But we also do corporate workshops. And in these workshops, we do games and exercises. And a lot of them are based on really focusing on what your partner's doing, really listening. Because I think, and I've been guilty of this as well, and perhaps people will identify with this. Let's say you're in a meeting and somebody's talking, and it could be a work-related meeting or some other meeting of a club, or even, sitting around family talking, and you listen to what somebody's saying, and at some point, they're still talking, but you've stopped listening because now you're thinking about what you want to say. And when you think about it, that's not polite. You should listen to people right until the end. I want people to listen to me until the end, so I should afford them the same courtesy. And so I tell people when you're communicating with somebody and they're speaking, don't listen to respond,
Hmm.
listen to understand.
Hmm.
Because many times, once you've understood, you're going to be in a better position to give a better response or
Hmm.
answer.
Hmm.
And that can lead to more persuasion, more influence.
Hmm. So active listening.
Active listening.
Hmm.
It's very important.
Yeah. So if I would like to persuade somebody, I have to make them feel seen, heard, valued. And I do that by actively listening. Now,
Actively, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, actively listening, and then sometimes instead of coming back with with your own thoughts, you can actually give them another opportunity. You can ask them a question. Oh,
Hmm.
that's interesting. Can you tell me more about that?
Hmm.
Or why did this make you feel this way?
Hmm.
When we take the time to really think about and care about what somebody else is saying, it really makes an impact. It really
Hmm.
makes an impact. And these days, it's no secret, political discourse around the world is very bad. It's very
Hmm.
bad. People are talking at each other or above or below each other. They're in their
Hmm.
own silos, and everybody sticks to their own story. And there's not a lot of listening going on.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think if people just listen more and try to understand what the other person was saying. Even then, at the end, even if they don't agree with them, at least there's something positive has come out of the exchange.
Yeah, it starts by listening. That's why we have two ears and one mouth.
Exactly.
I need this reminder, John. Thank you. So, do you think the art of persuasion and influence, can it be learned, or are you just born a natural, talented speaker, persuader?
Well, look, there are 8 billion people on this planet. So are there some who are born naturally gifted? Sure, there's probably a couple. I hate them too. So no, but honestly, I think for like the 99.99% of the people, myself included, it's something that can be learned. It's a skill. It's like any other skill. On my website, mannerofspeaking.org, there's right at the top, there's a quote from the poet Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he said, all the great speakers were bad speakers at first. And for me, that captures a very important idea, which is you don't have to be good when you start, but you have to start if you want to be good. And so it is a skill that you can work at. It is a skill you can get better at. And what I would encourage people that if they do a training or they read a book or they see a speaker whom they admire and they start taking notes, oh, I want to try this and this and this and all of these things. That's fantastic. Note it all down, but start with one thing. With one thing, because if you try and change too much at once, it's usually a mess and it can become frustrating. But if you say, for example, we've talked about storytelling, and you've never told a story in a business presentation, your next business presentation, tell a 45-second story, a 1-minute story related to the point. And just that change. See how that feels. Do it again the next time. Get comfortable with that. And when you're comfortable, then try adding something else. For people in their careers, especially those starting out, public speaking, communicating is something you are going to be doing for decades. We're playing the long game here. This isn't a sprint. So you don't have to do everything at once. You can step by step get better.
Great advice, John. Great advice. So my podcast is called Speaking of Meaning. When you hear speaking of meaning, what comes to mind?
Besides, well, this podcast, of course. But now that I think about it, in English, the phrase, speaking of whatever, this usually comes up in a conversation where two people were talking about topic A and something else is mentioned. And I go, oh, speaking of that. And then we go on to this other topic. And I like this phrase, speaking of meaning. It's not a common one, which makes it stand out. It's unique. But the speaking of meaning, when I hear it, it reminds me of the importance of having something meaningful to say. We're talking about this and this and this. Speaking of meaning, oh yeah, I should have something meaningful to say. I should have something relevant to say whenever I'm communicating. So that's what comes to mind.
Thank you, John. It took me some time to actually come up with a name for this podcast. When I was brainstorming, it took me a couple of weeks, but when I finally landed in the name that I wanted it to be about communication and also how we can create better communication, greater impact.
That's great.
And just like you've been mentioning today, communication is vital for not only our career, but also our personal relationships. So communication in the home, at work, in life. And I think you are a perfect example of this, where you're a wonderful communicator, and you've also shared with us how we can become better communicators and speakers. And in that way, we can become more influential and persuasive. Now, of course, you've talked about good intentions. And I'm sure that people listening have good intentions, and people have good intentions. And the intention is to become better speakers and communicators so that we can get our ideas across. And so I think thinking about speaking of meaning, we can talk and speak and communicate in a clear, concise, compelling, meaningful way with empathy. And when I thought about a guest to this show, your name came up because I've seen you up on the stage, and I've also seen you, met you in person, and you're also a good friend. And I know how you can touch lives with the way you communicate.
Well, it's very kind of you to say. I really appreciate it. And I want to say kudos to you for starting this podcast. I know that there's a lot involved in terms of the logistics and the preparation. It's a lot of work, but I think it's really important work that you're doing. I think if you can play a role, and you are playing a role in helping your listeners think about their communication style, about how they can become more effective, better communicators, and who in turn have a positive impact on others, it's the ripple effect. I grew up in a small town called Port Colborne in southern Ontario in Canada. And Port Colborne sits on Lake Erie, one of the 5 Great Lakes in the middle of North America. And we didn't live on the lake, but we lived close enough that I could walk to it. And in the summertime, what I would love to do when I was a little boy would go down early in the morning when there was nobody there. Then I would have this huge beach all to myself. And there were days when there was no wind, the air was clear, the water was like glass, and I could look across the lake and I could see the shoreline of upstate New York in the United States. And for me at the time, that was the most exotic place in the world because it was a foreign country. And what I would love to do is pick the biggest rock I could and I would throw it into the lake and it would land with this plop. And then I would watch the ripples spread out. And I would imagine that one of those ripples made it all the way over to touch the shores of the US. And I often think of those days now doing what I'm doing what you're, and you doing what you're doing, is because the rock, that's the message. Where it lands is the audience. But it's the ripples that make the difference, because your audience that you're impacting, people will hear this and they will go off and do something which impacts others, and they will impact others, and so on and so on. And so I think it's a great metaphor for your podcast, because that's what you're doing. You are cat throwing stones and making ripples.
And learning along the way too.
We're always learning, everyone.
Yeah. All right, John, before we wrap up, I always include some practical advice, some framework for our listeners. What small habit or daily practice would you give to a listener right now if they want to improve their communication skills?
There are lots of things that people can do. The most powerful are the ones where you are actually speaking. So some quick thoughts. You can turn on the camera on your computer, speak for 3 minutes, because we have to do a lot of online speaking like you and I are doing right now. Then watch yourself. It's painful, but you learn. I think second tip, be proactive with feedback. If you're working in an office and you're giving presentations, many times people give a presentation, they ask for feedback after, and people say, oh, it was great, which doesn't help me at all. It doesn't tell me anything. Many times people are afraid or hesitant to give feedback because they don't want to hurt people's feelings. But if you're proactive, if I know you're going to be in the audience when I'm speaking, and I come up to you and I say, Ibrahim, I know you're going to be there on Thursday's presentation, I'm really trying to work on pausing more and also making better eye contact with the audience. I'd really appreciate it afterwards if you would give me feedback on those 2 things. You're going to be much more comfortable telling me what you really think because I've asked you to do this. I've given you the permission. I think people can join any club, like a club like Toastmasters, where they can get up on their feet to speak and practice and just use it as a laboratory. I think watching talks, watch a TED talk or any kind of talk on YouTube, watch a speaker, but make some notes about what are some things you liked that they're doing, and what are a couple of things where you thought, I didn't like this so much. Because when we start listening to others, watching other speeches with this analytical perspective, it gets us to reflect on our own speaking as well. So there's some quick ideas.
So what I hear you say is speak more, be open to honest feedback, and join, for instance, a club where you get to not only speak online in front of a camera, but also to a live audience, and learn more about public speaking by watching, for instance, a TED Talk.
Yeah, watch TED Talk. There are books, there are blogs, there's all kinds of things.
So I know you have a blog, mannerofspeaking.org. If people want to contact you, where can they find you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I also have a YouTube channel, John Zimmer, Manner of Speaking. They can find me there. I have an Instagram account as well, though I'm not that active on Instagram. I have it, but I only use it on my laptop. I don't have it on my phone. I would say the best places would be the website, mannerofspeaking.org, or LinkedIn, or my YouTube channel. Those would be the top three.
And tell us about your blog, John.
Oh, the blog. I started this blog in 2014. So that's 11 years ago. And I thought, I have no idea how long I'm going to keep doing this. And I was reading 80% of blogs or more close after a month. But 14 years later, it's still going strong. It's got almost 1,000 posts. It's had a lot of visitors, like you mentioned. And I really enjoy sharing things online with people. If I get lots of nice comments back from people saying this was really helpful for this or that presentation. And that makes me feel good. It makes me feel like this idea of purpose, like I'm doing something that is bigger than me. And people say, isn't it a lot of work? It is a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like work. I enjoy it. And so it's out there. I try and post one thing a week, so you can subscribe to get the post sent to your mailbox. It's not spammy at all. And it's something I enjoy. I hope to be able to do it for another 10 years.
Wonderful. I think you've had over 5 million readers so far.
Yeah, visitors. I think so. Yeah, something like that.
Great, John. Well, John, this has been wonderful talking to you. Very valuable. You are a wonderful person, human being, a wonderful communicator, and you have a powerful way of communicating. And it has been an honor, and I've enjoyed every second of this. So thank you so much. I am confident our listeners have learned a lot today, and I look forward to seeing you in person again.
Absolutely. Ibrahim, it was a real pleasure. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I wish you the best of success with it. And yes, I hope that our paths cross in person very, very soon.